Hello guys, Omni here. It's time for my top 10 worst films of 2019. I'm going to go ahead and give a little bit of a clarifying statement at the beginning of this. A lot of the movies that are on this list, I don't necessarily think are terrible films. It's just out of the movies that I actually chose to go see, these were not quite up to par for what I was looking for. There was a lot of other films that came out later in this year or throughout the year that I thought were just better and more enjoyable for me personally. So some of these films, especially in the top half of the list, I did not necessarily dislike. I even enjoyed some aspects of it. I had a lot of positive things to say about them mostly. But as we start to get towards the bottom end of that, that's where we actually start to hit some of the films that I did have some negative problems with. Let's go ahead and kick it off with my number 10 film, and that is Disney's live-action remake of The Lion King. And the fact that this is on my list is mostly purely out of just pure disappointment and just the lack of emotion that was driving this film. This film is really beautiful, and I do think that it needs to be praised for the technical merit that took to actually construct and bring to life this near photorealistic animation, which it is, of a Disney classic. I grew up loving The Lion King. It was my favorite Disney film for such a long time. It was one of the first movies I ever saw in a theater. And, coming into this, there's just, with them so focused on bringing to life these animals, they lost every element of emotion for me and energy. And I could not get on for the ride. And it just came out as a shameless cash grab. At least with Aladdin this year, I thought there was a lot of energy and life to that and some enough different with that I actually ended up enjoying that definitely over this. So unfortunately, and it pains me to say that The Lion King, unfortunately, just barely makes it onto my top 10 worst films of the year. Moving on to number 9 is actually Good Boys, and I actually really did find myself laughing quite a lot throughout this movie. I thought the actors were all charming. They all pulled off a lot of really great laughs, but at the end of the day, it tried to have a really deep message, but it was just a really shallow, let's watch some kids do some really raunchy things and say some really messed up stuff. And it didn't really grow that deeper or earn that kind of deeper message that I was kind of aiming towards throughout. But I still enjoyed the film, but overall, just not up to par. Number 8 for me is going to be Annabelle Comes Home. I, again, liked this a lot more than some of the other recent Conjuring universe films like The Nun, The Curse of La Llorona, and I still thought this was overall very much better than those. I think this is, for me, I would argue my favorite of the Annabelle films. Annabelle creation was actually pretty good, and I actually really liked the characters in this and how this really wasn't even about Annabelle. They were really creative with their monsters, but again, it was not up to snuff. Again, it just, I don't know. It just seems like they're kind of running out of steam, just kind of churning these things out. But out of the other films this year, let's just say number 7 for me is going to be actually Pet Sematary, which I did like a lot of the things about this movie. The tweaks that they made to the story, I thought were interesting, and I thought they played a little bit better as far as having an on-screen dynamic between the father and the daughter character. Rather than with how the original had it with the father, the family, and Gage. Now, that being said, a lot of that tension was kind of taken away because of that, because it was really that heartfelt attachment to the baby that made that such a painful thing to watch in the original. And, the film overall, it was very drab. It didn't really do a whole lot that was really interesting. That being said, it just, I don't know. It didn't do a whole lot for me, and I didn't leave the theater feeling all that, wowed by what I had just seen. Moving on to number 6 is going to be Brightburn, and I was really excited for seeing this, and I did like the film okay enough. I didn't leave the film necessarily upset. It's just, I was expecting a little bit more of a deconstruction of this archetype, and the way that the story pans out, it really doesn't dive into that. It doesn't get any deeper than just being, what if an alien child had Superman's powers but did not aim to do anything good for humanity? And it makes for some interesting kills, and aside from that, it doesn't do anything interesting as far as the horror genre. It just kind of blends the superhero world in with this hard R kind of horror. Overall, it was just really a disappointing film for me. my number 5 is Zombieland Double Tap. Again, it comes down to this movie, like kind of like The Lion King, it didn't bring anything new to the table. This movie didn't update itself. It didn't really do anything that warranted its existence. I felt personally that it was just too many years too late for me, and it just didn't work. I enjoyed seeing the characters again, their interactions, but overall, it just felt like a lot of a retread, and it didn't bring any new fresh energy to the table for me. But again, like I said, on this list, the top 5 going to top 10, or from 5 to 10, I honestly, they're not movies that I think are bad. They're just, again, I'm trying to make sure it's clear that these movies I did not hate. I did not loathe. Just for me, I was very particular about the films that I actually went to see. And for that reason, that a lot of these films, or if I thought the film was going to be straight out bad, I typically just didn't see it. These are some films that I chose to see, wanted to see, and for me, they just ended up being disappointing compared to pretty much everything else that I saw. Number 4 is going to be Gemini Man, and this was pretty much a over-budgeted Netflix film. The animation, de-aging on Will Smith was not always on point. This movie only really has a first act and a second act. Aside from that, it doesn't really feel like you have any closure towards the end. You don't really feel like the movie concludes. You feel like it should actually kept going for me. That's the feeling I got in it. Aside from that, the action was really good, but overall, it was just a disappointing movie. Number 3, Dark Phoenix. And this is, again, another attempt at the Dark Phoenix saga, and it, again, falls short. I thought the movie was interesting enough. I don't think it was as bad as a lot of people said it was. It's not X-Men Origins bad to me. It's not worse than that. It's not the worst X-Men film to me, but it was just another, them getting a second chance to make this movie after what had been a pretty successful rebooted run at the X-Men, just again to drop the ball and have this kind of lower tier kind of boring story. It was just disappointing. And that leads into number 2 as far as disappointing. And the reason this is number 2 and not number 1 for me is mostly because it succeeds at being a really good action movie. And if you know what I'm saying, based off of that, it's going to be Terminator Dark Fate. This movie, I think, in the way that personally I think The Last Jedi is not a very good Star Wars film, it is a very good movie. It's a very good Rian Johnson film. And again, Rian Johnson's a really great director. But as far as it fits into the continuity and the lore and the characters we've had established and what that means, this movie kind of did the same thing for me. It took a lot of those tropes, it tried to recreate them and make something fresh while just carbon copying the exact same formula, changing all of the names unnecessarily and getting rid of so many beloved characters and important themes from the original one, making the 2 most classic films in the entire franchise, the first film and Judgment Day, utterly pointless right out of the gate of this film. This movie just failed and angered me to a crazy degree at how inaccurately they can kind of stick to their own lore and how disrespectful they were to the legacy of the films and what they just shamelessly tried to just retread and steer this into a new direction for what would be great in 2019 as opposed to actually gearing the franchise towards a logical end story point with character arcs that were not something we've already seen before. I have a whole video just ranting about this movie. Anyway, but it's not my number 1 because at least it succeeded at being an action film. I thought it was really fun. It did keep up the tension. It did have a lot of great action set pieces. And for that, I could not in whole heart put it at my number 1. This leads us into my number 1 pick, and that is Stuber with Dave Bautista and Kumail Nanjiani. And that's 2 people that you would think you could put together in a movie and get some great laughs and chemistry, because individually, these people are so good at stirring up laughs. I think Dave Bautista is such an underrated actor, especially within his ability to deliver and his comedic timing for line delivery and just his presence, his character, the heart and warmth that he can bring into a role is actually surprising because given where he started from, he came from and rose from, he's really evolved and grown as an actor over these years. And coming into this, I was really expecting something that was going to be a little special here, especially with Kamal Nanjiani, who is so hilarious. And I just feel like the script gave neither of them really anything to work with. They tried their best, and there's a lot of jokes that kept repeating throughout this entire thing. And it just, so much of this movie did not land. The plot was nonsensical, and having such two powerhouses in this film, they felt like they had absolutely no chemistry together. And the entire plot of this, of course, it's a comedy. It's a buddy cop kind of comedy. You don't really expect a high bar with this. And that's one of the reasons that, for me, going into this with those kind of low expectations, because I don't like go into this expecting like Oscar worthy dialogue or any kind of like hardcore in-depth plot that's going to blow my mind. So going in with already those kind of expectations and then those not anywhere being close to being met, this movie was just such a letdown. This movie just did not do anything for me with two people I adore and love seeing and other things. I just feel like this movie just, I don't know how it didn't work. On paper, it sounds like it would have been a flawless combination to execute a good, hilarious action comedy. And it, for me, it just completely failed. And that's why out of everything as a movie, narratively, subjectively, objectively, for me, that was the worst movie I saw this year. At least what I can say about Terminator Dark Fate, as much as that movie angers me and frustrates me with its illogical choices and what they did with the storyline in that film, I at least had a good time with the action. Everything was choreographed great. It looked amazing. There's good things I could say about the movie, but I don't have anything good I can say about Stuber. And that's where it leaves off for me. And again, like I'd like to reiterate, these are just the movies I've seen. There's a lot of movies I've heard people talk about, like Cats, Charlie's Angels, stuff like that, that may be worse. I've heard. I have not seen those films. This is strictly to films on the list of movies that I actually went to the theater to see. And I'd love to hear your all's list. I did my top 10, my favorite movies of the year, and I would love, if you want to check that out, give me your top 10 films of the year. I would love to hear those and share our thoughts and comments on that. But sound off. What was your least favorite films of the year? You can give me a top 10. You can give me just your least favorite, whatever it is. Let's carry on that conversation after the video. If you like the video, support the channel by giving a like, comment, subscribe if you like. I really appreciate you guys. We're going out, new year, going into 2020. Hoping we can go into the new year strong for the channel and with the community we're building here. I love talking to you guys down in the comments. Let's keep that going, and we'll look forward to having a great new year. I'm going to be trying to get some new things going down the pipeline to keep some of these more complicated reactions and videos going into the new year as well. It's been a lot of fun doing some of these newer formats, and we'll see how that goes and pans out into the new year. I've got some ideas for later in the year. I'm hoping, assuming I can save up the money to do certain things, I might be making some trips for some collabs, and we'll see how that turns out. Let's hope and pray, and we'll see how that goes. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for your support, and I'll catch you guys next time and in the new year. So take care, everybody. Be safe, and catch you all later.